A little native girl named Tala, only 8 years old, grabbed the hand of a weathered cowboy named Jack Harrow, her small fingers trembling with fear. That single act stopped a tribe of Lakota warriors in their tracks, their spears lowered, their eyes wide with shock. It was a moment nobody expected, a moment that changed everything on that wild western frontier. But to understand how they got there, you have to go back to the beginning, a couple of days earlier, when the plains were quiet, and the trouble was just a whisper on the wind. If you are watching this on television, take a second to grab your phone and hit follow, like, or share. That one click means a lot, and it helps us keep telling stories that matter. Jack Harrow was not a man who stood out in a crowd. His face was lined from years under the sun, his gray-blue eyes always looking somewhere else, like he was chasing a horizon nobody else could see. He was a cowboy, a loner, drifting along the edges of Lakota land with a small herd of horses. He kept to himself, not because he was cold, but because he had learned the hard way that getting close to people usually ended in trouble. The Lakota village nearby was a place he avoided, not out of fear, but out of respect. He knew their history with men like him, white men who came with promises and left with blood on their hands. Jack just wanted to move his horses, make a little money, and keep the peace. But peace is a fragile thing, is it not? The Lakota were on edge. A group of U.S. cavalry had set up camp a few miles off, their white tents stark against the rolling hills. The tribe knew what that meant. Soldiers never came for nothing. They came for land, for control, or for war. The air in the village was thick with worry, the kind that makes your chest tight. Warriors sharpened their spears, mothers kept their children close, and the elders whispered about old betrayals. Jack felt the tension every time he rode near their land. He saw the way their eyes followed him, hard and unyielding. To them, he was just another outsider, another threat in a long line of threats. He did not blame them. He just kept his distance, his hands steady on the reins, hoping to stay invisible. Before the cavalry's arrival, Jack had crossed paths with a Lakota elder named Mahpia, a woman with silver hair and a voice like a low drum. She was gathering herbs near the river when Jack's horse startled her, spilling her basket into the mud. He dismounted, knelt, and helped her gather the scattered leaves, his hands careful not to crush them. Mahpia watched him, her eyes sharp but curious. She said nothing, but when she stood, she pressed a single sage leaf into his palm and walked away. Jack tucked it into his pocket, unsure why it felt important. Later, he saw her watching him from the village, her gaze softer than the others. It was a small moment, but it lingered, like a quiet promise something bigger was coming. It was a hot afternoon when everything changed. Tala, a small girl with a quick laugh and eyes that sparkled with curiosity, had slipped away from the village. Maybe she was chasing a butterfly, or maybe she just wanted to feel the grass under her feet. Girls are like that, always wandering where they should not. She was out in the open plains, far from the safety of the village, when the ground began to rumble. The cavalry was moving, their horses kicking up dust as they rode hard toward the Lakota land. Tala froze, her small body caught in the tall grass. She tripped, fell, and disappeared into the green, her heart pounding as the hooves got louder, closer, a storm bearing down on her. Jack was nearby, checking a horse with a loose shoe, when he saw the girl go down. He did not hesitate. He swung onto his saddle and spurred his horse forward, the wind whipping his coat. The cavalry was closing in, their shouts sharp and urgent. Jack leaned low, his eyes locked on the spot where Tala had fallen. He reached her just as the first riders thundered past, their horses' hooves tearing up the earth. Jack scooped the girl up, pulling her close, feeling her small frame shake against his chest. For a moment, it was just them, the world a blur of dust and noise. Jack's horse snorted, steady under the weight of two. The Lakota saw it happen. From the edge of their village, warriors grabbed their weapons, their faces tight with suspicion. To them, it looked like Jack was taking the girl, not saving her. Kangi, the tribe's leader, stepped forward, his tall frame casting a long shadow. His eyes were like stone, unreadable but fierce. He shouted something in Lakota, his voice cutting through the chaos. Jack did not know the words, but he felt their weight, anger, distrust, maybe even fear. A young warrior named Chaska, barely 20, raised his spear and charged, the tip gleaming in the sun. Jack spun his horse, still holding Tala, and the spear sailed past, so close it brushed his hair. The girl gasped, her fingers clutching Jack's sleeve. As the dust settled, Winona, the translator, stepped between Jack and the warriors, her hands raised. She was young, with a braid that swung like a rope, but her voice was steady. "He saved the girl," she said, her words clear in the tense air. Chaska's spear wavered, his eyes flicking to Tala, who was still clinging to Jack. The warriors murmured, unsure, their hands tight on their weapons. Winona turned to Jack, her gaze searching. "Why risk your life?" she asked, her tone not accusing but genuinely puzzled. Jack just shrugged, his voice low. "Could not leave her there." Winona nodded, her lips pressed tight, and relayed his words to Kangi. The leader's eyes softened, just a fraction, but the tension held. The cavalry reined in, watching from a distance. They did not care about Jack or the girl. They were happy to let the tribe handle their own problems. One of the soldiers, a wiry man with a crooked grin, laughed. "Let them sort it out," he said, his voice carrying over the wind. Jack was trapped, caught between two groups who saw him as the enemy. His heart was pounding, but he kept his face calm, his arm steady around Tala. He could have dropped the girl and run. Nobody would have blamed him, but he did not. He held on, his big hand shielding Tala from the world. "What do you do when everyone's against you?" Then it happened. Tala, trembling like a scared rabbit, reached up and grabbed Jack's hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his rough ones, holding tight, like she was anchoring herself to the only safe thing she could find. Chaska, the young warrior, stopped dead, his spear still raised. The other warriors went quiet, their eyes fixed on the girl. Tala was not reaching for her own people. She was reaching for Jack, the stranger, the white man they all despised. The silence was heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Jack did not say anything. He just looked down at Tala, gave a small nod, and kept his hand steady. That moment shifted something deep, something nobody saw coming. Kangi raised his hand, and the warriors lowered their weapons. The cavalry's laughter died out, their faces unsure. Jack kept his eyes on Tala, making sure the girl felt safe. But the tension was still there, coiled like a snake. The Lakota were not ready to trust him. Not yet. Kangi stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Through Winona," he spoke. "Prove you are not our enemy," he said. "Take your herd through the mountain pass, succeed, and we will listen. Fail, and you and the girl are a curse." Jack looked at the pass, its jagged walls rising like teeth against the sky. It was a death trap. He nodded anyway. What else could he do? That night, Tala's mother, Ayana, approached Jack as he checked his horses. Her face was worn, her eyes red from worry. She held a woven blanket, her hands trembling as she offered it to him. "For saving my daughter," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack took the blanket, its colors vibrant even in the dim light, and draped it over Tala, who was curled up asleep nearby. Ayana's lips quivered, like she wanted to say more, but she just touched Jack's arm and walked away. The gesture was small, but it carried the weight of a mother's gratitude. Jack looked at the sleeping girl, the blanket rising with each breath, and felt something stir in him, a sense of duty he had not felt in years. The cavalry was still out there, watching from the hills. Jack knew they were not just waiting, they wanted his horses. A lone cowboy in a narrow pass was easy pickings. As he prepared to move the herd, he noticed Tala trailing behind, her small feet kicking up dust. "Go back," Jack said, his voice soft but serious. Tala shook her head, her jaw set. The girl was stubborn, and Jack could not help but respect it. He let Tala stay close, but he kept an eye on her, knowing the pass was no place for a kid. The herd was skittish, sensing the danger in the tight, rocky path. Jack's hands were steady, but his mind was racing. How do you keep a promise when the odds are stacked against you? They reached the pass at dusk, the light fading into a soft purple glow. Jack worked fast, guiding the horses with low whistles and gentle nudges. He was halfway through when a gunshot split the air. The cavalry had made their move, firing from the ridges above. The horses reared, their eyes wild, their hooves churning the dirt into a storm. Jack cursed, his eyes darting to Tala. The girl was too close, standing on a rocky outcrop, her face pale but defiant. A massive stallion broke free, charging straight at her. Jack dropped everything, his whip, his rifle, and dove for the girl. They hit the ground hard, rolling down a grassy slope as the horse thundered past. As they lay in the grass, Jack's breath ragged. A shadow fell over them. It was Mahpia, the elder from the river. She had followed, her steps silent despite her age. She knelt beside Tala, her hands gentle as she checked her face for cuts. "You carry a heavy burden, cowboy," she said, her voice like a song carried on the wind. She pulled the sage leaf from Jack's pocket, the one she had given him days before, and pressed it into Tala's hand. "For courage," she said. Tala clutched it, her eyes bright with something new, not fear, but trust. Mahpia stood, her gaze meeting Jack's faller, and nodded once before turning back to the village. It was a moment that felt sacred, like a thread tying them all together. Jack's shirt was torn, his face smeared with dirt, but he held Tala tight, checking her for injuries. The girl's eyes were wide, but she was okay. They lay there for a moment, catching their breath, the herd still chaotic above them. Jack's chest heaved, his lungs burning from the dust. He looked at Tala, saw the girl's small hand still gripping his, the sage leaf tucked between her fingers. "You all right?" Jack asked, his voice rough. Tala nodded, her lips trembling but her eyes steady. Jack helped her up, brushing the dirt from her hair. The herd was calming, but the danger was not over. The cavalry was still out there, and the Lakota were watching. Kangi had seen it all from a high ridge. He saw Jack risk his life, saw him choose the girl over his own safety. The old leader's face softened, just a little. When Jack and Tala climbed back up, a few warriors ran to help, their hands steady as they pulled the two to their feet. They did not speak, but their eyes said enough. Tala clung to Jack, tears streaking her dusty face. "You are not the enemy," she whispered, her voice so soft it was almost lost in the wind. Those words hit Jack hard, like a stone in his chest. He did not know why, but they meant more than anything else that day. The Lakota were not united, though. That night, around the village fires, voices clashed. Kangi and a few others saw something in Jack, something worth trusting. But others, like Chaska, were not convinced. They had seen too many white men lie, too many promises broken. "He will betray us," Chaska said, his voice sharp. The elders listened, their faces unreadable. Jack stayed on the edge of the village, tending his horses, keeping Tala close. He did not want to be there when the arguments turned to action. But trouble has a way of finding you, no matter how far you stay. Before the fires died down, a young Lakota boy named Luda, no older than Tala, slipped away from the village and found Jack. He held a small, beaded pouch, his hands shaking as he pressed it into Jack's palm. "My brother gave this to me before he died," he said, his voice barely steady. "He said it keeps you safe." Jack opened the pouch, finding a tiny carved hawk inside. He looked at Luda, his eyes wide with hope, and realized the boy saw him as more than a stranger. Jack tied the pouch to his belt, his fingers brushing the smooth beads. "I will keep it close," he said. Luda's face broke into a small smile before he ran back to the village, his footsteps light in the dark. Jack felt the weight of his trust, heavier than any burden he had carried before. Under cover of darkness, the cavalry struck again. They set fire to the grasslands near the village, hoping to drive the Lakota out. The flames spread fast, a wall of red and orange roaring across the plains. The village erupted in chaos, children crying, horses screaming, the air thick with smoke. Jack was helping an old woman to safety when he realized Tala was gone. His heart sank. He ran toward the fire, ignoring the shouts to stop. The heat was like a living thing, pressing against his skin. He soaked his coat in a water trough, wrapped it around his head, and plunged into the flames. He found Tala trapped under a smoldering log, her small body curled up, coughing in the smoke. Jack's eyes stung, his throat burned, but he dropped to his knees, heaving the log off with a grunt. It was heavy, scorched, and it took everything he had. He scooped Tala up, the girl's weight light but precious in his arms. The fire roared around them, the heat searing his back as he ran. They stumbled out, collapsing in the cool grass, Jack's chest heaving as he checked Tala's face. The girl was coughing, her lips pale, but she was alive. Jack held her close, his own hands shaking now. As they lay there, gasping, Chaska appeared through the smoke, his spear still in hand. But instead of raising it, he dropped to one knee, his eyes locked on Jack. "I was wrong," he said, his voice rough with emotion. He reached out, touching Tala's shoulder, then Jack's, a gesture of respect that silenced the murmurs of the watching warriors. Chaska stood, his face set, and began shouting orders to douse the remaining flames. The warriors moved as one, their hands working alongside Jack's to save the village. It was a turning point, a crack in the wall of distrust, built by one man's choice to run into fire. The Lakota saw it all. Warriors who had wanted Jack dead now stood silent, their spears lowered. A few dropped to their knees, their heads bowed in respect. Kangi stepped forward, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. "This man has the heart of a wolf protecting its pack," he said. The words carried over the crackling of the dying fire. The tribe moved as one, their spears forming a protective ring around Jack and Tala. For the first time, they saw him not as a white man, but as a man. Tala's small hand was still in Jack's file, her grip weak but unbroken. The next morning, as the village cleared the ash, Winona brought Jack a bowl of stew, her hands steady but her eyes searching. "You could have died," she said, setting the bowl down. Jack shrugged, taking a sip, the warmth spreading through him. "Had to try," he said simply. Winona sat across from him, her braid catching the morning light. "My father died saving me from a fire like that," she said, her voice soft but clear. "You remind me of him." She stood, leaving Jack with the stew and a weight in his chest he could not name. Tala, sitting nearby, smiled at Jack, her small hand still clutching the sage leaf. It was a quiet moment, but it bound them closer than any words could. The cavalry was not finished. By morning, they had surrounded the village, their rifles glinting in the dawn light. They wanted the horses, the land, and Jack's head. Jack offered to face them alone, to keep the tribe out of it. Kangi shook his head. "You will not survive," he said. Tala, though, would not let Jack go. The girl stood up, her small hand grabbing Jack's with a strength that surprised everyone. This time, it was not fear in her eyes, it was something fiercer, something that made Jack's chest ache. What kind of kid stands up to a fight like that? They walked out together, Jack's boots crunching on the dry grass, Tala's small steps steady beside him. The cavalry waited, their commander a lean man with a scar across his cheek sneering. "A kid protecting a coward," he said, his voice dripping with scorn. Jack did not move. He put a hand on Tala's shoulder, his voice calm. "If you shoot, shoot me, not her." The air was thick, every breath heavy with the weight of what might come. Then, a horn sounded from behind. The Lakota warriors stepped forward, their spears and bows raised, standing tall behind Jack and Tala. Kangi's voice rang out. "Tonight, we stand with this man." Before the standoff could break, a lone rider broke from the cavalry's ranks, a young soldier with a face still soft with youth. He rode forward, his hands raised, no weapon in sight. "I know you," he said to Jack, his voice shaking. "You helped my pa when our wagon broke down last spring." The soldier dismounted, ignoring his commander's shouts, and stood beside Jack. "This man's no enemy," he said to his own men. The cavalry stirred, their rifles wavering. The young soldier's defiance, sparked by a memory of kindness, cracked the commander's resolve. It was a spark of humanity in a sea of distrust, and it held the line. The cavalry faltered. They had not expected this, a tribe united with a lone cowboy, now joined by one of their own. The commander's eyes narrowed, but he did not give the order to fire. Jack stood steady, Tala's hand warm in his. The girl's courage, that small stubborn grip, had turned enemies into allies. The cavalry lowered their rifles, just enough to show they were backing off. They turned and rode away, their hoofbeats fading into the morning haze. Jack let out a long breath, his shoulders easing for the first time in days. But the peace was shaky. The cavalry left a threat they would be back, with more men. That night, the Lakota gathered around their fires, their voices low and urgent. Fight or run? It was a question with no easy answer. Jack saddled his horse, his hands moving slow, deliberate. He planned to slip away, to keep the tribe out of his mess. He was not one of them, no matter what had happened. He was almost gone when Tala found him, her small face streaked with tears. "If you leave, we lose our hope," the girl said, her voice breaking. Jack froze, his hand on the saddle. Leave, and he was free. Stay, and he was tied to a fight that might destroy them all. What would you do? As Jack hesitated, Ayanna appeared, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She held a small drum, its surface worn from years of use. Without a word, she began to tap it, a slow, steady rhythm that echoed through the night. The village grew quiet, the arguing voices fading. Ayanna's eyes met Jack's, and she nodded toward Tala. "She chose you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And we choose her." The drumbeat grew stronger, pulling the tribe together, their faces lit by the fire. Jack set his saddle down, his decision made in the rhythm of that drum. A call to stand with those who stood with him. Jack stayed. He could not explain why, not even to himself. Maybe it was Tala's eyes, or maybe it was the way the tribe had stood with him. He spent the night helping fortify the village, piling stones and sharpening stakes. The Lakota worked beside him, their hands quick and sure. Chaska, the young warrior who had once tried to kill him, handed Jack a water skin, their eyes meeting for a moment. No words, just a nod. It was enough. Dawn was coming, and with it, the cavalry. Jack felt the weight of it, but he pushed it down, focusing on the work. During the night, Luda returned, his small figure barely visible in the shadows. He carried a bundle of arrows, their tips freshly sharpened, and handed them to Jack. "For tomorrow," he said, his voice steady despite his age. Jack took the arrows, his fingers brushing the feathers, and saw the determination in Luta's eyes. He was not just a child, he was part of this fight, just like Tala. Jack knelt, meeting his gaze. "You are brave," he said, tying one of Luta's arrows to his belt beside the hawk pouch. Luta's smile was small but fierce, and he ran back to his mother, leaving Jack with a renewed sense of purpose. The sun rose, and the cavalry returned, their line stretching across the horizon. There were more of them now, their rifles gleaming like a promise of death. Jack rode out alone, his horse steady, blocking the path to the village. Tala ran after him, grabbing his hand. The girl's eyes were fierce, like a little warrior who had seen too much but refused to back down. The cavalry raised their guns, the air thick with tension. Jack stood tall, his hand tight around Tala's ride. He was ready to die if it meant the girl would live. Then, something changed. The cavalry commander, a man with scars that told their own story, raised his hand. "Hold," he said, his voice rough but clear. He looked at Jack, then at Tala, his eyes lingering on the girl's small hand in Jack's alipert. "I have seen that look before," he said, almost to himself. "A man who'd give his life for a kid." He paused, his face softening, like he was remembering something long buried. He signaled his men to lower their weapons. No shots were fired. The cavalry turned and rode away, their dust fading under the rising sun. As the dust settled, Mahpia approached, her silver hair catching the light. She carried a bundle of sage, tied with a thin cord, and handed it to Jack. "Burn this tonight," she said, her voice steady. "It will carry our thanks to the spirits." Jack took the sage, its scent sharp and grounding, and nodded. The elder's eyes held his for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of all he had done. The village began to cheer, a low, rising sound that grew into a chant, not for victory, but for unity. Jack stood there, Tala's hand in his, the sage in his other, feeling the weight of a new beginning. Tala looked up at Jack, her small hand still holding tight. "You are our family," she whispered. The Lakota gathered around, their faces soft with something new: trust, maybe even hope. Kangi placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, a gesture that carried more weight than any words. The tribe embraced Jack, not as a hero, but as one of their own. That small hand, Tala's, had done what no treaty or battle ever could. It bridged a divide that seemed impossible, but the story did not end there. The Lakota knew the cavalry would not stay gone forever. They worked to rebuild, their hands moving together, Jack among them. He taught the children how to calm a nervous horse, his voice patient, his hands gentle. Tala was always there, watching, learning. One evening, As the sun dipped low, Kanji called Jack to the fire. The old leader handed him a small carved stone, a wolf with its head raised. "You carry our spirit," Kanji said. Jack took it, his throat tight. He did not know what to say, so he just nodded. Weeks turned to months, and Jack stayed. He was not a drifter anymore. The village became his home, the people, his family. Tala grew taller, her smile brighter, but she never stopped holding Jack's hand when the nights got dark. The cavalry did come back, but never with the same force. The story of Jack and Tala had spread, a tale of a cowboy and a girl who changed everything. It was told around fires, passed from one generation to the next. A small act of courage, a hand reaching out in fear, had built something stronger than any wall. Years later, when Jack's hair was more gray than brown, he sat with Tala, now a young woman, under a wide, starry sky. They did not talk much, just sat, the silence comfortable between them. The stone wolf was still in Jack's pocket, worn smooth from years of touch, alongside the hawk pouch and a faded sage leaf. The Lakota still told their story, not as a legend, but as a truth. Two worlds, divided by pain, brought together by a girl's small hand and a man's steady heart. It was not about winning or losing, it was about holding on, no matter what the world threw at you. If you are watching this on television, take a second to grab your phone and hit follow, like, or share. That one click means a lot, and it helps us keep telling stories that matter.